Thank you all for being here. This is a great group of filmmakers. I'm super excited about this. We're going to celebrate you. We're going to take a tour through your beginnings, some of the challenges, and ultimately arrive at where your voices, the voices that you have, that you've developed, that you've cultivated. But I got to start with, I got to be a fanboy, Linda, I'm sorry. You're nominated for an Emmy. Congratulations. I have no idea how this works. How do they tell you? How did you find out that you have an Emmy or that you've been nominated?
Actually, I got woken up by a phone call from Wanda Sykes at about, it was in the morning. I was kind of still awake. Anyway, and she's like, Linda, yeah, hey, Wanda, is everything okay? Hold on. She gets Paige on the phone. You got an Emmy nom. And that's how I found out. I didn't know. And it was just like, oh my God, that's so cool.
That is awesome. I hope I get a call from Wanda. I hope we all get a call from Wanda. That's terrific. Zetna, we were chatting out in the hall. We'll try not to get emotional, but this is a bit full circle for us because about a decade ago, we did a panel. We were just wet behind the ears. It's great to see you. Tell me how you first got the idea that you wanted to be a director, that you could be a director.
It is really great to be back here. Yeah, with you. So thank you. That happened a little bit late for me, I think. I wasn't the kid who picked up a camera as a teenager and made movies, and it actually never occurred to me that I could do this as a job or a career or pursue this art form when I was a kid. I thought I would go to school, I was gonna be a lawyer, I was gonna get a good job. And at some point, I think, taking theater classes and reading plays, and I watched a ton of television growing up. It was always on in my house. Whoever woke up turned it on, whoever went to sleep turned it off. There were no rules. I could watch any movie I wanted to as a kid, so I was always in the theater. And then I think as an adult in my 20s is when it kind of started to percolate, that I thought, I love this, and what can I do and how can I do it? So yeah, it came a little bit later, and just a love of movies and TV.
Antonio.
Hi.
It's great to have you here. When did you first have the idea that you could have a career or pursue this as a way to make a living?
I think it took me a while to understand what a director did for a long time. When I was a kid, I loved movies, I loved TV, but I came from a family of scientists and biologists, and we would travel around a lot. So I got to live, and I was born in Colombia, but I got to live in Brazil, Ecuador, Mexico, Panama. But I never really knew what directing meant. I just knew that I wanted to tell stories because I would go from one country to another and kind of collect little stories. And it wasn't until, I think it was in high school, that I'd done some acting, and there was a small film going on in Ecuador, and I auditioned for that role. And when I got this tiny role, I told the director, I'll do it, like very foolishly and very naively. I said, I'll do it if you just let me watch you once I'm done, because I'd love to understand what a director does. And his name was Sebastián Cordero, and he was like a mentor to me. And watching him direct was the moment where I thought, okay, I don't know if I can make a living out of this, but this is definitely what I want to do. And it was that moment for me.
Yeah, that's great. And was that, were you growing up here in the States, or were you traveling, as you mentioned? Was this happening overseas?
This was overseas. So I did come to the States for college. And so I have been, LA is now my home, and I've been here many, many years. But this was while I was growing up in South America.
And Linda, what about you?
Well, I kind of came up through the production route because I went to college to be a sociologist and fell into the business when I was 25 years old. And for me, it was always just about baby steps to success. Like, how do I become a assistant, to a producer, or get in the writer's room, or, so I PA'd, and then I became an assistant to a commercial director, and then a pretty big time television director. And so it was baby steps. I wanted to be the best production supervisor. Then I became an AD, and then I wanted to be the best AD. And I didn't really think about directing as an option until I got one opportunity in Montreal in like 89 or 90. And I thought, oh, yeah, I could see myself doing this. And it's just been it's been slow ever since.
You're very modest. I appreciate that. Were there specific shows that influenced you, like as a kid, or filmmakers? I mean, you mentioned somebody, but before you had that chance, were there filmmakers, starting with you, Linda, that you thought, oh, that's what I want to do?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in all fairness, I was a black and white movie freak. I loved to watch all those old comedies, Frank Capra and all of those. But really, it was Francis Ford Coppola that really blew my mind. And I think it was actually One from the Heart, which he shot all on the stage at Hollywood Center. And I was just like, oh my God, like, that's insane, like what he does. Tucker, his transitions, like, he's really like who I would aspire to.
Oh yeah, I love Coppola.
God help us.
Just watch The Outsiders. If you want to mortgage your house to make your apocalypse now.
Oh yeah, no,
please.
Outsiders was brilliant. I mean, fantastic.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Zetna.
I love that you said that, because I agree. I'm a huge fan. And I actually grew up watching a ton of 70s cinema. My dad was much older than my mom, so I also love 40s cinema. I love. I watch a lot of noir, and my dad, even right before he passed, I was here and he was in New York, and we'd call each other and be like, what's on Journal Classic Movies? And we'd watch the same movie. But I grew up, I love Pakula and 70s thrillers, and all those New York stories were everything to me. I just was obsessed.
And New York stories, because you were in the Bronx.
I was born in the Bronx. Yeah, born and raised.
Awesome. Antonio.
Yeah, I think also I grew up with a lot of 70s cinema in South America. At the time, there was no, streamers or ways to watch things simultaneously with the rest of the world. So I remember getting like VHS tapes and even Betamax and watching these movies that, just took a long time to get down there. But like William Friedkin, I love, rest in peace. But To Live and Die in LA, The Exorcist, those movies, it just kind of rocked me. And also always kind of admiring and rooting for, Latino directors, whether it's Guillermo del Toro, who's going to be here today, incredible, to, Iñárritu, Fernando Meirelles, Walter Salles, all those giants are such an inspiration. So yeah, it was a bit of both for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think there's like a universal respect and inspiration by the filmmakers that you've mentioned. I was watching the 4K To Live and Die in LA literally yesterday in preparation for this meeting, if you see that car wreck. And it's just like, how do you do that? How do you, it's so visceral and exciting. Something that dawned on me as I was preparing for this, and I think it's always kind of existed in the subconscious, which is a lot of my cinematic touchstones, my heroes growing up, Coppola, Spielberg, Friedkin, they have a very different, very few Latinos in the group, I'll say. And I think the ones that you mentioned maybe came up a little bit later. But like as a kid, like what did that exist? And this is the trailblazing. This is the fearlessness that you're going into a business. And we haven't even gotten to the fact, women making it in this business. But the fact that there's something that was so strong, such a pull, such a desire that you're like, I have to do this, despite the fact that there was probably nobody that looked like you or had that upbringing that you had, that had to deal with, some of the adversity that you did or the challenges. Were there any Latino filmmakers that were kind of in your pantheon of inspirations?
Well, honestly, for me, my Latino idol when I was a kid was Cantinflas. Like, my dad would go to the West Side to get his hair cut, and we would go to the movies. And it was in Spanish, and I did not understand it, but I freaking loved him. And I remember when he did that movie with Anne Margaret with the mule, and he's at Paramount, and I was just like blown away by that. He was iconic. I mean, he really was. And when I did my one and only movie, that kind of tanked, somebody referred, she must have watched a lot of Cantinflas movies. And I thought, you're damn right I did. That's why it's so fucking funny. I mean, he thought he was insulting me, which he was. But, I just turned that bad boy around.
Love it. Thank you. Zetna?
I just want to listen to Linda all day. That was it's so great.
No, ask my son.
To be honest, for me, when I was growing up, I didn't, in terms of filmmakers, I didn't really see myself, or there was no one for me that I aspired to. I think came later when I got exposed to, the sort of giants that you mentioned, and then that opened up for me. But I think that part of growing up in the Bronx when I did was that what was available was a lot of television and the movies that I kind of talked about. But in TV, it was interesting because my grandmother spoke no English. And I lived with her for a while, and she lived with us for a while. And we watched every single telenovela that could have ever been on in the late 70s to the 80s. And I just watched everything with her. And then I watched everything else with my, the rest of my family. But I don't think at the time that I thought about, again, this as a path for me. So it was just absorbing what was in front of me.
Yeah, that's interesting how you watch telenovelas with your grandmother, and then your start. And I think we often don't know exactly where we want to go in the business or how to go about it. Like we all want to make, whatever the big movie is or the TV show, but we also got to have a job. We got to pay the rent, and you go where that is. And you started off working in daytime.
I did. I worked. I directed on Guiding Light. And then I directed on One Life to Live. And for me, amazing, brilliant experiences, both. I felt lucky and blessed to kind of get in that door because like all of these, kind of subsets of our industry, it's very difficult, to get in at all. And so I met a theater director who was a mentor of mine, amazing, Brian Murtis. He still doing beautiful, beautiful theater. And he was a director on Guiding Light. And he got me in the door, and I shadowed there for a really long time. And then I got a shot to direct. But I learned, I feel like there's not a day on a set that I don't think about many, many experiences from Guiding Light or One Life to Live. Yeah.
Did Wanda Sykes call you when you won your Emmys for those?
I didn't get that call. I didn't win.
Nominated. Very good. When you got your nominations. Antonio, there exists an idea of what a director should be and look like. And do you think you fit that idea?
No, I don't. Definitely not. I think... Yeah, like we were talking about growing up, there really weren't Latino directors the way that, there was Kubrick and Hitchcock and Spielberg. So when I admired them growing up, I definitely never saw myself ever fitting in a category like that. And I definitely understood, I think, the power TV, because like you guys were saying, telenovelas or El Chavo del Ocho, Carrousel, all these like shows that I would grow up with, or where like the whole, like in Brazil where I lived for a few years, the whole country would tune in at 8 p.m. for the novela, and I saw the power of it. But those directors were faceless. To me, I didn't know who they were, and I was curious, but didn't really even understand that there were many directors behind those shows. And so, yeah, when I thought of director, I thought of Alfred Hitchcock in like a suit, and I was like, that's way beyond my dreams or reach.
Linda, what about you?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, just I think there exists an idea of what a director should look like. And do you think that there's an idea of what a director should look like, and do you fit that?
No, I don't think that there's an idea of what a director should look like. We're not with the scarves and the caps and the bullwhips, I don't think.
Speak for yourself, Linda.
But I will say, I did have an interesting experience when I did the Brady Bunch anniversary reunion, and all the kids, which were obviously adults at the time, said they had never worked with a female director, much less somebody of color. When they grew up, it was all white guys in suits. And so if that's what we think directors are supposed to look like, I guess, but I will say I started dressing a little bit better. Just so I could look like I was worth the money they were paying me. I did a Disney pilot. I told Gary Marsh I was in Prada. He goes, "Oh, we're obviously paying you too much." They were not.
Zetna, when you were, let's say when you were working in New York before you had come out to LA, did you feel like you fit in, or were you very cognizant? I mean, were they open? Were they welcoming? Or did you have to like prove double time that, you belong there?
It's interesting in terms of the soap world or daytime at that time. It was evolving. It was obviously there was a heyday of daytime that I missed, and when I went into daytime, the shows had already started to get canceled, and there was a big cultural shift that was happening. So I moved into that space with a lot of gratitude and love for the genre and for all the people that were working for decades in that world, that were losing their jobs and losing this huge industry in New York. So for me, it was about learning and absorbing and being really present. And, there were camera operators who'd been operating, longer than I'd been alive. And so it was really important for me to kind of honor that and honor them. And so I was by far kind of the youngest at the time. And there were women directing daytime, which was really amazing. A lot of my mentors were women, but I don't know that there were actually any directors of color in New York at that time. So it was probably like across the board how everything else was then, except that there were women that I could see doing amazing work, really talented.
That's actually great to hear, that you had some other people that I'm sure they shared war stories and, got you ready. My dad is an engineer still. And I don't know if your parents were disappointed when you decided you wanted to get into this business, but engineers run the world. But he always used to talk about how he was the only Mexican in the room of engineers, going back to his days at Arizona State in his engineering classes, and always had a chip on his shoulder, something to prove. And I think he had something to prove because I think probably most of you would agree that like you're under the microscope and you really, really have to deliver. Have you guys experienced that at any point? I'll start with you.
Well, yeah, first of all, I totally feel I disappointed my parents in many ways when I call and they're, saving the rainforest and I'm on a rooftop in Vancouver shooting someone in tights, fighting. But no, I mean, I forgot the question. Sorry, what was the question?
Or just having to really prove your mettle because, I mean, particularly in the early years, I mean, everybody has to prove that they can do it, that they belong in the arena. But, if you look different, if you have if you're in an English speaking set and you have any like kind of accent, you look, those things I think compound and people will look at you like, can you do this?
Yeah, no, in that sense, for sure. Especially early on, I felt there was this kind of extra pressure of, it's so hard to even get this job that I hope I don't screw it up. There was a sense of that. And also I would say a sense of, particularly as a director, when you're trying to find your own voice, I felt as a Latino, sometimes it was like whatever job I could get was already such a luxury. And so I was so grateful for it that I couldn't really pick and choose and be like, well, this show is more my voice or this story is more. It was like, wow, I get to work. I get to be on set. Absolutely, I'm going to do it. And so there was both that pressure and also that kind of, well, how do I now bring my voice to something that wasn't necessarily what I thought I would be directing?
I love that you've talking about your voice in the work, and I'd like to kind of go on that line. Zetna, is there a place or a show or a time where you felt like you were really able to explore what your voice was, or maybe you had that, you were cognizant of that from the beginning, or was there a place, we worked on Jane the Virgin. That was a very, I thought, welcoming, difficult, because the schedule, 18 strips. I mean, but you had come from shooting 60 pages a day, so probably easy for you.
90, 112.
Oh my God, this is wild. Was there a point in your trajectory where you're like, you realize, this is my voice and I'm gonna put it into the material?
I think for me, similarly, I think in the beginning, working was so the goal to get the job and to work, to be honest. And I was so happy to be on set and so happy to get the first job and then the second job and to keep that going. But I was always very aware of the kinds of shows that I was watching and the kinds of shows that I wanted to work on. And in the beginning, it was very difficult. I couldn't get a meeting. I couldn't get anywhere close. Like I think about when I started out, I was obsessed with The Wire, like probably so many of us. And still to this day, I rewatch it. I'm like, The Wire. And I couldn't, that was not in the realm of my, reality at the time. But I always knew, for me, my sensibility in terms of the darker narrative or that kind of dramatic storytelling, what I really love. And so try to kind of figure out how to get there. And then when it started to happen and I was working on shows that had that sensibility and had collaborators and showrunners and writers that were interested in hearing from me and me adding my point of view and my experience, then that was dreamy. I actually had an amazing time on Ray Donovan, which is also very difficult for many reasons, but a dynamic on that show, or I should say the storytelling was really, I knew that family. Like, talk about dysfunctional working class family, I got that. So I could relate and I could bring something to that. And that really helped kind of get me on that path to those kinds of stories. And then I got to work on The Deuce with David Simon and George Pelecanos, and I could express my love of The Wire. But it was on those kinds of shows when I started to get those opportunities that I could, have more of a voice.
That's amazing to hear. Linda, was there a point when you kind of felt that also, where you were able to really interject your point of view into the material?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like for me, in terms of my voice and what I responded to, it's really just comedic. It's comedy. I don't think of myself as a Latin female director. I think of myself as a comedy director who happens to be Latin. You know what I mean? So all I try to do in terms of my voice when I'm on a show is really just, how can I elevate the comedy? How can I elevate the moments that lead to those laughs, while still finding the heart, because any good comedy has to have heart. And you still have to have those peaks and valleys, so to speak, so you can really earn the laughs. But I would say Scrubs was the first place that I really felt like I could bring something to the table and not just kind of do what the producers wanted. Because like Zetna said, when you're starting, you're just freaking happy to have the job and be there. And so, you just want to do the best you can with your episode. And it's very hard to look past that. Do you know what I'm saying? Because they always say you're defined by the last thing you did.
Yeah, you're only as good as your last episode.
So I would say that was probably the first place that I was actually really able to find my comedy voice, if you will. Mm-hmm. Like, how can I make this funny and embrace this moment and shoot it in a way that will heighten anything?
As someone who studied your credits, I feel like, just as an outsider, I sense a voice in the fact that you do multi-camera, single camera, episodic variety. I mean, you work in so many different formats. For most people, just picking one is hard enough. That speaks a lot to kind of who you are, that nothing stops your dream. Nothing gets in your way. Like you go after it. And I love that. Like, it's incredibly inspiring. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to accomplish that?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's like, I started in multicam. I started as a production supervisor, then associate director, and that's what I started directing in. Like I said, I did that show in Montreal in like 89, but in 1990, I went back to be the production supervisor on Saturday Night Live. I went from directing, making a certain amount of money, to $1,400 a week, because I just knew that was going to be better for me for my career. And I love comedy. And that was actually where I met Chris Rock and how I got the Chris Rock show. That's the backstory to the Chris Rock show. That's where I started doing single camera pieces. It was the multi-camera house director, but then we did all these little elements. So that's really how I started to get into the single camera side of it, so to speak. And then when we came back the next year and the next year, I just kept trying to up that game a little bit. But I think that for me, when somebody said, you have to pick a lane, are you a variety director? Are you a sitcom director? Are you a single camera director? You're a multi-camera director. And I just couldn't understand why. Like, my mom always told me, you can do anything you want because you got a good head on your shoulders. So I didn't understand why. And a lot of us know Gary Halvorson here. Gary Halvorson was doing it. Why couldn't I do it? And so it wasn't like I was trying to be Gary Halvorson. I was just trying not to let that box define what my career path could be, because I love everything. You know what I mean? I love single camera. I love multi-camera. I love shooting music. I love that more than anything. It's just, you're telling stories through the music regardless. I love stand-up. I just love everything. I'm like still jumping for joy that I get to do this every day. And so, I mean,
it's so
I get
impressive, though. It's so, because you're using different parts. First of all, I really like your mom, but you're using
amazing.
Different parts of your brain. I mean,
Yes.
Single camera, you're in it, like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
just to develop that and
Yes.
prove to people that you can do it and then do it. I mean, that's amazing.
And I'm not going to lie, it was hard the first couple of times because it is a different mindset. Oh, wait, no, we're blocking for the proscenium, not for the camera up in the closet up here. You know what I mean? It's just a different way of blocking. But I also did a lot of theater, so, I have a pretty diverse background. Yeah.
In stand-up comedy.
And in stand-up, yeah.
But you don't talk about that.
No, it's what I did to turn on the writing part of my brain. Hey, I was getting booked.
I have to ask, I'm sorry, another fanboy moment. You shot in the White House. What's that like?
Really daunting, because you cannot use words like, I would like to shoot the president from this corner. No, seriously though, it is really about the dialogue there in protocols. And so like you can only go in certain times and you have to go get screened every single time, and all of that. But honestly, like I'm a Mexican girl from Detroit, who, by the way, everybody thought was Chinese. And I'm at the White House with the Obamas, and I'm like, wait, how did this happen? You know what I mean? Like with Stevie Wonder, Paul McCartney, Carole King, it was just like that was insane. But anyway, the whole thing about that is just the protocols and understanding, okay, he's gonna enter from here, he's gonna cross here, he'll seat here till da-da-da-da, then he's gonna walk this way. I mean, you just have to be so specific. You have to count the steps. But stage managers do that all the time on these award shows. You got 10 steps to get to the podium because those ladies are in those high heels and they can't do it. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was super duper interesting. And can I tell a quick Michelle Obama story?
Sure.
So what happened was Michelle Obama was hosting because that's how they did the in performance at the White House. And so I was walking her through her rehearsals and doing all of this and talking about the prompter and all of that. And anyway, so after the show, we were in what they call a click line, where you go and shake the president's hand, you get your picture taken. And I saw Mrs. Obama, and I'm like, Michelle, you did such a great job. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Mrs. Obama, Flotus, I don't know what protocol is. And she said, Linda, this is protocol, and gave me the biggest hug ever. And I have to say, every time I went back, she remembered me and like, I remember our story. It was like so cute. You know, they were real people.
That's
Sorry.
wonderful.
Sorry for
That's
taking
great.
time.
I love that.
Sorry.
Love that. Zetna, you've worked in so many spaces now, huge visual effects shows, crime, as you mentioned, pilot for the Bosch, the second show. You do a lot of work in England. Can you talk just a little bit about that? No pressure, but you are representing out there.
I can talk a little bit about that. It's similarly listening to Linda talk about kind of where you come from and then where you find yourself. And me, I grew up in the South Bronx, the Bronx, the Bronx of the movies that we've been talking about back in the day. And then to be on a set in, Cardiff in Wales and have an international crew and be directing these kinds of stories is not lost on me. I'm the same way. I feel like I want to pinch myself. I love it. I can't believe I get to do this. And I love shooting abroad. I love shooting here, but it's really special for me to get on a plane. I feel like a kid, like I get on a plane, I'm meeting new people. It's a new way of working. The hours are different. The culture is different. A little bit of the language is different. The way you interact with your team, with the department heads. It's really exciting and the level is really high. People really care. They're artists, like filmmakers, everyone on the crew. Like here when you're working here, or I go to New York. It's just an incredible, a place to work. I love it. And hopefully I'll be working there a little bit more with the move. So.
Great. Antonio, we're down to our last few minutes here, so I'm going to ask this question and one last one from all of you. You've worked on a tremendous number of shows. You've made some of your own movies, a lot of action, really cool stuff. I watched your Lincoln Lawyer. You did 2 of them. I watched it yesterday, and excellent episodes. I mean, it's just fantastic.
Thank you.
One of the things I find so interesting about that is the original film had Matthew McConaughey. It's not what's in the book. What's in the book is an attorney that's half Mexican, right? His mom is Mexican. And when they made it a series, they reversed and went back to what the book was. Can you talk just a little bit about what that experience was like, working with Manuel Garcia Rolfo? It's a great show, and I'm so glad to see that you're on it.
Thank you. No, I completely agree. I've been a fan of the books for many years, And this character of Mickey Haller, as you point out, is half Mexican, half American. And as much as I love the film, it was clear that, I don't know, 15 years ago, whenever it was, they leaned very much to the kind of non-Latino side of the character. And to see how Mickey Haller today is very much leaning toward the Mexican side of his identity is beautiful. And I think it is an example of some of the optimism and some of the gains we are, achieving. I definitely think that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago necessarily. And I think my experience in Lincoln Lawyer was truly incredible in that, Manuel loves to, speak in Spanish. So I got to direct him in Spanish. My AD, Jose Molinari, who I think is here, we spoke in Spanish. He was amazing. The DP was Pedro Millan. And so we were shooting in LA, but we could have been in any kind of Latin American country. And that was a beautiful feeling and something that I hadn't felt for many years. So to me, it was a joy. It was a real joy. And I was just proud to be a part of that show. Yeah.
That's great. That's great to hear. Beautiful. Last question for you guys. So we, SJ and I talked a little bit about legacy, and it's you have many more episodes in you. Well, you've already got over like 100 and 200, I don't know. It's incredible how many episodes you have, but there's many years of work left, but we start thinking about legacy at some point. And in the same way that in the beginning of our conversation, you talked about the filmmakers that inspired you, the hope is that one day, and maybe it's already happening. I mean, it happens to me because I love your work. I wish I could do Sesame Street, Linda. But I want to be like Zetna. Zetna did this incredible work. She started here, and then she worked her way up here, and then she did all this beautiful work overseas. There's more to be written there. And Antonio, kind of your trajectory, you've shot in different countries, and there's a lot, still under the hood. And Linda, who willed her way into working in, so many different spaces. What for you would you like that legacy to be? I mean, that's got to be part of it. But so let's start with. You want to start? We'll start with Antonio.
Wow. I mean, I think it's a great question. I think it's hard to answer, but I do think personally, because I've had these kind of different experiences growing up, I do feel that being Latino can mean so many things. And so to me, one of the things that hurts me when I see, in our community, in TV and film, sometimes it's so rare to even get a Latino quote unquote show on the air or film on the air that all of a sudden it becomes this pressure of like, we have to check every box, and this show has to be, we got to throw everything at it. It's got to be, everything has to be Latino, let's wave this flag. And I think to me, that's not necessarily what being Latino is. So when I think of legacy, like I'd love to just continue to do great shows and great stories where the characters happen to be Latino, where there happens to be a Latin flavor to it, but it's not this, I'm trying to tick all the boxes. To me, a project about East LA is very different from a project in the antro of the Efe or in Rio de Janeiro. Like I would watch all of those, but what I wouldn't want to do is do one thing that tries to cover all that. And I think that it's important to celebrate the diversity within our community. So what I would love to do is keep, doing things, but do a great thriller that's happens to be set in Colombia, or just do, a horror film where the main character happens to be Latino or Latina, and that's it. It's not about their backstory. It's just a great story with representation. And so, if anything, that's what I'd love to leave behind.
That's great. Thank you. Zetna?
I don't know that we can say it better than that. I mean, I think that's everything. For me, I want to work on the best stories that I possibly can. I always have wanted to do that. And it's always so important to me to have representation, but not for the sake of representation. It's led by story. And if it's a thriller, or if it's crime, or if it's, sci-fi or dark comedy, or it's about having the story go first and then populating it with point of view. And we can all bring that, the specificity that we can all bring to the stories that we tell. Then it is a Latino project or a Latinx project, or it has a lead, or it has a point of view, or it has something about it that is representative of our community. And I can't agree more. We shouldn't aim to check every box. Other filmmakers don't aim to check every box. They're aiming to tell an amazing story, the best story that they know how to tell. And I think for me, that's what I want to lead with. Like, I really want to think about the films that I want to make and the TV projects that I want to work on, and be led by that.
Thank you, Zetna. That's great. Linda, I don't have any other guests I can go to right now. I've got to go to you.
I don't know. Legacy is such a big word. You know what I mean? To me, people who are legacies are like Coppola or like, Hitchcock and Kubrick and those types of guys. But I think in terms of like me personally, I think my legacy, like really what I want to shine a light on is that you can keep doing work in all different genres if you have the capability to do that. I think that I just want to be able to be an example of somebody who can be successful and take those baby steps to success. And in times of, everything's going to shit, be able to, like Zetna has said a couple of times, find that gratitude, find that gratefulness, and be grateful that we're even having to go through that shit. Excuse my French. Sorry, that's rude. But I think that's really kind of it. I do have one big Latino project that I'd like to do, but like I said, I've never really been about the Latino projects. I want them. I want to see them succeed. But I guess because I'm so born and raised so differently. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just like Antonio just said, like a story in Los Angeles is not the same as Columbia, and it's not the same as Detroit, or Chicago, or Seattle, or Miami. We have so many different stories to tell. And I think that when we try to check all those boxes, that's when they fail, because that's not reality. We all have the grandma who sometimes only speaks Spanish, sure, but some of us don't. You know what I mean? I just feel like we have to open up the world to not being about Latino, being about the doctor, being about the guy, the flaming hot Fritos guy that came up with that thing. Like, that's a great story. You know what I mean? He happened to be Latin. Like, that's it. Like, I don't know. I'm going on. I'm sorry, you guys.
This is great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You all have been fantastic. We're very fortunate to have you as artists in the Guild sharing, and so much beautiful work. So thank you for coming today. Really, really appreciate you.
Thanks, Ed. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.